Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's LJC event with Winner. Let me introduce myself first of all. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Abby. I work with the LJC and the other 15 plus ish communities, all of which are free and run by RecWorks. We are a tech recruitment company, but with a massive difference. So, as a company, obviously, we're always on the lookout for more clients. And some of our best clients have actually come from community members who recommended RecWorks to their internal talent team. So, if you're hiring for a new team or you're working for a company that is, please do get in touch. If you want to know more about what we can offer, just ping me a message on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Slack. My name is, as you see it on the screen, and we really look forward to working with you. So, what's the difference, I hear you ask? Well, also, we really do believe that recruitment can be a force for good in the industry beyond just placing people in jobs. We have a particular focus on learning, mentoring, and personal development. If people want to learn and others want to share their knowledge, we are more than happy to connect you through communities and events like this one. We see this as giving back to those we've worked with in the past, but also paying it forward to those we hope to work with in the future. To date, we have run hundreds of different events for engineers, developers, students, graduates, CTOs. We have run conferences, lightning talks, hackathons, all sorts. Earlier this year, we made our 5,000th introduction through our Meet a Mentor program, and that does what it says on the tin. You can be a mentor or a mentee, and you get to meet each other. That's just another of our free communities that we run. As I've already said, we love to give opportunities for people to connect, and this event is part of that. If you'd like to know more about any of our other communities, please do, again, get in touch with me on LinkedIn, Slack, or Twitter, and we can take it from there. Just to let you know, today's session is being recorded and it will be available for you on YouTube. I will give you the link to the channel in the chat later on. And if you have any questions while Winner is speaking, please just make a note of them, or you can put them in the chat, and there will be time for Q&A after the talk. With no further ado, though, let me hand over to Winner. Over to you.
Thank you, Abby. And thanks everybody for joining. Can you all still see slides? Good to go. Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep, we can see your slides. You're all good.
Perfect. So I'm joining not as an avid Java user, I'll be honest, but as someone who's presented and joined these events a bunch. And I thought I'd take a little time to talk about sort of my part of the world, which is platform engineering. And it's somewhat new, but also very hot topic right now, I think, in a lot of the tech news. And there's a lot of different information out there. And I think actually platform engineering comes down to a fairly simple story. And that's what I want to share, because I think that platform engineering as a practice, as it has evolved, does add a lot of value to organizations. So I'm going to talk about platform engineering through a story about shoes, actually. I'm going to talk about an organization, a company, small company that started a century ago in the UK, let's say. And that company decided, you know what, we are going to take our chance. We really love shoes, and we think we've designed the best shoes out there for folks who work in hospitals. We think we can make the right shoe to make customers happy. So I'm going to talk about this company from the years way before platform engineering ever would have been a consideration, up to when they have a bigger tech organization. So this company starts out as a single storefront in London, Marylebone, near some medical practices, hospitals, and they just decide, simple operation, let's see how it goes. Just great. They open their doors, and folks, it turns out, do like their shoes. They made a bet that they could make comfy shoes for folks who are on their feet all day, and in fact, they delivered. So that one storefront in London got traffic from folks in the UK, and slowly they realized that actually they could open up a few more stores in the UK. They were able to support that. So little by little over the years, they opened up a few more brick and mortars, started to learn a little bit more about the market. And they also started to notice that folks would come into the UK and then buy the shoes, and then they go to other countries in Europe and beyond wearing those shoes quite happily. So after a couple decades, economy is quite strong. The small handful of UK stores are going really well. The company decides we really want to have our happy customers be able to get those shoes in other places too. At this point, retail stores were the only way to do that. So they decided to expand beyond the UK and give it a try and see what it was like to not only have a couple of stores, but have countries where each country had stores. So this expansion brought a need for the business to, call it whatever you'd like, industrialize, scale, standardize, and start to take in some in-house expertise to be able to grow the businesses, these brick and mortar shops, to different countries. So where before you had one country, one legal system, one set of addresses, one shipment process, now things get more complex. You have to think about how do we more quickly get real estate properties? How do we close in different countries where we don't know those policies? How do we think about resource management and scaling that so that we've got everybody trained up as quickly as possible? How do we make sure in each place we've crossed all our T's and dotted all our I's? So you start to see the business evolve toward sort of specializing, having specialized groups that are focused on getting these new countries and new shops off the ground while still making the shops they do have profitable and open for those happy customers. And so one by one, they opened brick and mortar shops in the EU, and that was great. And then fast forward a couple of decades, let's say the 70s, 80s, and like many retail stores with brick and mortar, they decided, you know what, we really want to just reach the rest of the world. And the way we're going to do that is by catalogs. So I don't know if you've ever done mail order, but in a time before the internet, mail order was companies' best ways of publicizing their stock and getting customers that wouldn't normally be able to come into their shops. So again, they scaled back on the expectations for this release. Rather than saying, okay, well, we have stores everywhere, so let's open catalogs everywhere. They said, let's open a catalog for our UK customers and give our UK inventory in that catalog and see how it goes. So similar to that single storefront in Marylebone, the UK catalog launched in the UK and went really, really well. And so the business decided, okay, we've seen the success here, and we have a lot of happy customers, and we're hearing from locations in Europe that they would also like to be able to do mail order. Not everybody lives in the cities where we're located. So again, let's take a decision to industrialize, standardize, scale, whatever you'd like to call it. Let's grow now that we've proven this experiment a bit. So they decide to grow and open one at a time, more catalogs in more regions. And naturally, similar to opening shops, brick and mortar shops, they needed to evolve the business. So there's still that foundational set of requirements or focused parts of the business below that had already started with trying to expand to new locations. But on top of that, there's new challenges, new puzzles to solve around how do we standardize and scale our inventory, our shipping, our publishing, our customer support, because all of a sudden you've got folks calling at all hours from all locations, and you want to make sure that they can read through the catalog effectively, place an order effectively, and then that order comes to them exactly as they expect as quickly as possible. So they start to build those muscles, build that business practice around scaling all of these sorts of business concerns. And that continues. Catalogs and retail shops are strong for quite a long time. And then in the 90s, the world as we know it changed, and the World Wide Web came, and it changed, but not dramatically. So at this point in the 90s, like many retail stores, folks weren't quite sure whether the world had changed or just some new noise had come along. So taking a small dip in the World Wide Web waters, this company decided to essentially do what a lot of companies did at that time, which is to create a web page. Somebody in marketing knew somebody who could come on board and help them get a web page out the door. But essentially all it was a phone book. It showed all their locations and the hours and the phone number, and it also talked about customer support for the catalogs and how to place a mail order, which was great. But again, after a few years, they got traffic to the site, but then looking around, there are many other retail shops that were converting their web pages from phone books to actual virtual shops. So in the 2000s, so actually first, before we talk about that, for this simple web page, quite straightforward in a really traditional sense, the way they approached the expertise needed to build this web page and actually get it out there is probably something you're all familiar with, which is where they have a designer creating some pages and passing those over a wall to a couple of engineers who know how to write the code to get those images and the text on the pages. And then that gets all sorted out. And then they're told from an operations group, like, oh, we have some databases and some servers, because they're already doing the inventory management and some of the communications required for the business units that are already up and running. Sure, we can publish that. We'll get you sorted out. Just tell us when you're done. So you kind of toss it over the wall from design over to the developers, and then toss it over the wall or get some FTP instructions from somewhere to actually get that website live, which they were able to do. But then, like I said, when they looked around, they saw online wasn't going anywhere. They wanted to take their static site and convert it to an e-commerce site, so an online desktop format. And this should sound familiar by this point, but to do this, they needed to sort of industrialize, standardize, scale. But first, they needed to figure out, well, what's the difference? What's the delta in expertise? And what are the requirements we have for this e-commerce site compared to the static website? And as many of you can probably come up with on the top of your head, things aren't as straightforward when you decide to sell something online versus just tell people where they can go. So with this decision to create an e-commerce site, all those foundational concerns are still there, and parts of the business are already set up to make sure that this e-commerce site is legal, compliant, secure, et cetera, et cetera. But then on top of that, an e-commerce site, they decide to create using Spring Boot, some React thrown in there. They decide to create their e-commerce, get it out the door, and evolve from a team that was kind of 3 siloed roles into a team that looked more like a balanced product team. So you'll see at the top, there's now a product owner looking more toward the strategy and the roadmap. Design is complemented with UX skills, thinking about the UI, the interactions. And then below that, to do a full e-commerce, even using web frameworks, you're going to need more. And so when this team was formed at this point, when you're hiring engineers, there was an operations team looking after like a handful of on-premises and remote servers and databases. But by the time they decided to go to e-commerce, they were hiring full stack engineers who could do the full front to back end communications for this new site. So this team was formed kind of as a experiment unit in whatever way, agile, lean, and they were given the really clear scope of, let's start small. Let's launch in the UK to UK customers and addresses only. And all we're going to do is show our shoes, let the customer pick a pair of shoes, pay for the shoes, and they'll get them in the mail. But even for that, to get the walking skeleton, it required a lot of pieces that weren't required with the static site. So this group of engineers that were more full stack and more DevOps background worked with operations to start to figure out the quickest ways to get that experiment out the door. So yes, we have the code and the frameworks, but we also want to automate things so that quickly we can get things out and we know we're not breaking things as we build them. Let's automate them. Let's create a pipeline. Let's add some basic error handling. We need to look at the logs. And at this point, the engineers had experience with the cloud. The company hadn't yet doubled down on creating any cloud accounts, and this was that opportunity. So for the first time, the application team said, look, to get this out the door as quickly as possible, let us just create a separate user database in AWS and let us do some auto scaling, and trust us, we've done it before, we can get it out the door, we'll get this experiment validated much more quickly. Operations has a lot on their plate, they're not going to be able to support us. And so like many businesses, they're like, well, that sounds good, yeah, okay, let's give this a try. So operations goes and opens up the first cloud account and then gives the application team keys to the kingdom. Here you go. You know what you're doing. Make good decisions. Go ahead and get everything wired up. So working together, collaborating, but still that team was empowered to go find the service, go create the databases they needed, set up their deployments, and do all of the sensible enough to them defaults. And that launch was successful. So this is a very successful company. They just keep moving forward. And they launched successfully and realized that the web wasn't going anywhere. Online wasn't going anywhere but up. The revenue potential and the opportunity there was still quite great. And so after they launched that, they said, well, now there's this mobile thing. Quite soon after the desktop world got popular, people started getting mobile phones. So actually, we should probably also launch a mobile app, because we have really, really busy healthcare workers who have smartphones. And wouldn't it be great, especially for our market, if they could just use their phones, because they're not sitting at a computer all day. So the company said, well, okay, we have this desktop site out now. Okay, fine. Yeah, let's do that. And so in a way to enable the experimentation, another team was created to do the mobile application. And so as you can imagine, a lot of those same concerns about, if I flip back, about getting the app, deciding on the language, deciding on the CI/CD tools, deciding on what kind of alerting and observability they were going to use, and also tapping into the cloud and creating other services that they need for mobile deployments and also simulated testing. They were again enabled to, for the sake of getting the mobile app out in the market, they were able to take those accounts, get the keys, get themselves their services, wire things up. These are full stack engineers that were very focused on getting customers the things they wanted, but they knew enough about the defaults to get everything going and get it out the door, which was great. and it released. So now there's a mobile app in the UK, and the online app in the UK is going strong, and it's evolved to include things like user accounts and address books and features like favorites. The mobile app launched successfully and is going to be a fast follow. So of course the company is saying, let's double down. This is looking great. We like the returns that we're getting from the investment we have in tech. We have lots and lots of happy customers getting great shoes online and through mobile. So let's try some other mobile platforms, and let's build out more of an experiment, which is wonderful for the customer, and it's wonderful for application teams. So it's great for the business. But overall, what that means is, as they decide, let's build out more features, let's build out more platforms, they're also deciding, let's create more teams. So they're operating in that lean way, and they want to empower those teams to move quickly and get experiments out the door and get feedback and keep customers happy. But now you've got 4 application teams all thinking about the same concerns one by one. And if you've worked on teams anything like mine, you've got scripts being passed around via Slack or email, or pointing to GitHub where things are cloned, copied, changed. Everybody's getting enough done that things work, figuring out the deployment, figuring out the defaults, and then getting things out to customers, which is great. But when we step back and think about it, at the pace of growth for expanding not only a desktop app, but 2 mobile phone apps and then tablet apps, you start to see that you have many, many teams. Also, as you think about the regions and countries, you start to think about, well, payments just doesn't work online out of the box for UK and the rest of the world. You have to do more. Same with localization. Customers aren't going to be able to understand English in every country, so you need to support that. So not only do you have these application teams shipping out the thing the customer wants, you also have these teams starting to form to extract things like payment services and localizations and migrations. So taking the rough and ready V0 website and extracting out the payments, or extracting out the bits that are going to be common. Again, that's great. But when you think about all these teams and how quickly they can multiply, you start to realize that the rest of the business isn't going to know where to go when they have security concerns about what's happening online, when they have compliance requirements. You have operations team that all of a sudden realizes that they've got tens of accounts out there in their public cloud, and not everybody has chosen the most sensible defaults. You've got legal that needs to understand what's being shipped. And at the end of the day, you're left with a staggering amount of everybody doing their own thing and everybody talking to everyone about the same thing over and over. And so, again, as part of the standardization, industrialization, whatever scalability that you want to call it, the company decided to create a platform team. They call it a platform team. You may have heard of it as a cloud team, or a cloud excellence team, or a DevOps team, or an SRE team. Ultimately, they're all names that, if you peel back the layers of responsibility, they all point to the same fundamental value add, where you have application teams sending out the UIs for customers. The platform team is really the value add of consolidating and standardizing the concerns of the broader business and enabling those application teams to move more quickly to get things out to customers. So platform teams will tend to start to form not when you have one application team or 2, but when you have enough that you're seeing inefficient duplication on those teams in terms of the type of work that they're doing. And also on the business side of things, where you have many parts of the business trying to reach out inefficiently to many application teams. Platform teams are the API, the intermediary between those product-facing teams and the rest of the business. And platform teams are really situated to take the concerns that will help all of the teams in the business operate more effectively, and try to standardize those. So that is the basics of what a platform team is. You have what has become quite a large tech organization by the time, let's say like 5 teams, by the time this platform team gets started. And what that platform team will look like, some of the questions that I've thought about and people have asked about is, well, how do you know what to do as a platform team? Like, I think the concept of you're meant to enable these intermediate teams so that they can be more effective at delivering what we need for getting customers their value. A lot of times platform teams will start with this idea because they're in growing organizations. How can we get a new application team up and running quickly? So that application team is probably going to be doing skeletal work initially. They're going to need pre-production concerns met first. So they're going to need things like a CI/CD, things like, what are we doing for version control? Do we have artifactories? Do we have shared repositories? So those pre-production concerns are often the lowest hanging fruit for that platform team to provide value to application teams. So that rather than having to say, well, okay, what service do we need to sign up for? Or at my last company, I used Circle, so let's just sign up for it here. The platform team is positioned to say, you need a new environment to be able to develop the Android app German release. Here you go. The mechanism for that can be any number of things, but ideally a self-serve API where you say, I need a configuration for a mobile app. We're just starting out, so development environment's fine. Here you go. And so the platform team is positioned to say, pre-production environments, we got it. You ask us for it. As quickly as possible, we'll turn you around all the tools you need without you having to think through and redefine a whole bunch of things that the organization has already considered. So get through all the cruft of the non-functional requirements and get those teams up and running in pre-production. And then, of course, as you get to production, you have more teams concerned like security, finance, compliance, those sorts of things, in addition to your application teams. So how can you make sure that your application teams are getting value there? And that's when you start to make decisions about sensible defaults for configuration, networking, certificates, all of those things you start to build out in automated ways so that that same German mobile team can say, okay, we've got our skeleton situated. Now we want to set up full CI/CD. So can we get a production environment? And the platform team looks around the organization, consolidates, standardizes, and makes choices so that that application team doesn't have to. And then ultimately, you've got your shop growing, and you've got your online customers happy, continuing to make orders, and you have a more productive organization as a result. And that's the story of the shoe company that got a platform team.
That was really cool. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Winner? Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. That's absolutely fine.
I guess I have one because this resonates quite well with the experience I have of e-commerce, but yeah. I come from a different side of it, seeing it already established into the final product you're talking about.
Yeah.
One of the things I wondered is, do you have any tips or guidance of kind of knowing when is best to kind of take that next jump and kind of breaking out the next team? Because sometimes I think people might do it too early or too late. So have you got any kind of general rules of thumb of when it should start to be thought about?
Yeah, I think you've probably heard of Team Topologies, the
Yeah.
book. Yeah, of course. So I think they have great guidance about just monitoring what's the communication within the team and outside of the team, and when do the seams really start to creak. So how painful is it to make a decision? How painful is it to take that next step? So in the case of the thinking back to the online shop going to Europe for the first time, for example, going to that first European location, the team had to stop everything to figure out localization, to figure out payments, to figure out like a number of non-functional requirements, really. Like the customer doesn't care what you have to do under the hood. They just want to be able to buy the shoes. So I think that stepping back and thinking about, well, how can you enable that sort of rollout to happen faster and not in one single team? Those questions kind of get you to the point where you're asking interesting things, I think.
Yeah, no, I like that pain idea. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much, Winna.
Yeah.
Chris Jenkins, go for it.
Go for it.
Hey there. First of all, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Perfect.
Excellent. I'm on a weird setup, so I had to ask that first. Thank you ever so much for that talk. Really interesting to sort of see an example to motivate this stuff. It's really, really interesting from our point of view, because we literally have just formed a platform team.
All right.
I'm the only person in it at the moment,
Yep.
and we're trying to figure things out.
Yep.
So one of the things we're kind of noticing, maybe anticipating a bit as well, is when you try and standardize approaches to things, we're already getting pushback from some of our teams because not everyone agrees on ways of doing things. And I know we can't satisfy everybody, but we also need to not standardize on approaches. We need to standardize on approaches that actually work for teams. Do you have any tips or suggestions for trying to find that balance so that we can get teams aligned behind what we're trying to standardize upon?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think your case of forming the platform team and having the single role and just starting out is really common, and it's hard because there's a lot going on, I imagine, and a lot of fragmentation to kind of inventory and evaluate. I think it's just really compelling at this point to focus on the collaboration with those teams and to figure out the pains that the teams have. So rather than thinking of it as like building out a tool repository, it's thinking about how do you prioritize the pain points that teams share collectively. And then as you start to stack rank, what are the problems that are most common, and which of those problems, if you standardize it, would provide the most value? I think then if you can work that out through sort of a product mindset, right? Go spelunking, go talk to your users, find out the stories of why it's so painful, then it becomes a more compelling story about, yeah, I know you haven't used this tool, and I'm suggesting that you do, but you have more of a story to say, I'm suggesting it for these reasons. So I think in general, treating a platform as a product, similar to the way those application teams treat what they're shipping as a product, and thinking of your customer makes it easier to reach out to teams, have conversations, connect with them about the pains they're experiencing. And then you have a relationship where you can come back and say, I heard you, and we did a bunch of research, and this is where we landed, and we'd love for you to give it a try. So that is often not the way the platform team might start working. But I think that in general, if you think of it in a product with a product mindset, then oftentimes the stories of why somebody should take on the tool kind of bubble up anyway. Does that make sense, or do you feel like teams are just going to be like, nah?
I think it does. I mean, it was so like great answer. You kind of had me at go talk to your users. It sounds obvious when you say it. Yeah. I'm gonna try to do more talking to the users, because I kind of realized as you said that, like, okay, we're talking to some of our users more than others. There's definitely more we can do there. So I'm going to give that a shot and see how it goes. Thank you.
That's great. I think the biggest That's great. I think the biggest waste you see in platform teams, unfortunately, is when they work in a vacuum. So when they take a decision because they know something works well, but they haven't collaborated with teams enough to understand whether those teams would adopt. And I think that's when you have platform teams that might disappear for 8 months to build the perfect X, Y, or Z, and then release it and nobody uses it because they're like, what? This isn't relevant to me, or it's too complicated, or it doesn't work in my situation. So I think similar to the examples of, start with one shop and then grow to a few, and then start with one country and grow to a few. It's that same thing of, talk to your users, find a team that feels especially receptive to getting help, and try to work with them to see if they'll be an early adopter and help them spread the word. I think it's really important as you build out that set of tools to do things like lunch and learns or demos, and to really reach out to your community and say, this is what we built for you. Like, if you don't use it, then we've lost this game. But again, that it takes a lot of work. And I think more than anything else, what I've seen in successful teams has been like leadership and management buy-in. So is that something you feel like you have, Chris, or?
I think we do, actually, yeah. I think we're doing well there, in the sense that VP of engineering is one of the ones who gave us the remit to actually start up the team in the first place.
That's great. I think like the bi-directional work with your users, but also make sure your management understands the value you're trying to provide to support talking to your application teams and that sort of thing.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, I will take both of those on board. I'll try and be mindful of them as we move forward and see how it goes. Like I said, thank you very much.
Good luck. It's very exciting.
Next,
I'm going to need it. No, thank you.
Sorry. We do have a question from Chris Davies, and then we'll come to you, Alex. So go for it, Chris.
Hey, yeah. First of all, thank you very much for the talk. It was really useful. I was just wondering, as like platform teams grow, obviously you mentioned that it's like useful to have a central part of the organization responsible for these sorts of problems. Do you see, as organizations grow beyond that, a need to kind of divide the platform team by domain, like having SRE or like a monitoring team, a CI team? I just wondered how you see that growing.
Yes, definitely. You'll see, especially in larger organizations, you'll see multiple platform teams, or sort of specialist sub teams that work with the platform team. So absolutely, yeah. I think I didn't use this phrase during the presentation, but cognitive load, which is the amount of energy it takes to think through something, like the platform team remit is make it easier for application teams to deliver. And in exactly the same way, platforms can solve many, many, many complex, hard problems. And if you start piling on too many of them, too many hard problems on the platform team, they're going to get overwhelmed with cognitive load as well. So that's when, yeah, absolutely, you'll see SMEs start to merge. You'll see different parts of the platform team focusing on different bits, servicing different parts of the tech organization. So absolutely, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Excellent. And Alex, you had a question.
Yes. Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good. The cat chewed my old pair of headphones, so I'm trying a new set. So just kind of following on from Chris Jenkins's kind of perspective here with the idea of, your platform is a product team for your application teams. I love the idea. I've fully bought into it. I think it's a very effective way of looking at your platform and how it should grow with your users. But platform teams also have an element of legacy BAU tasks. They're keeping the whole joint running, aren't they? Do you have any advice on or insight into the best way to run a platform team? Would you espouse certain agile methodologies, like maybe it's Kanban with a work in place limit, or Scrum, some way of balancing those concerns? Because I find platform teams get left on their own quite frequently just to make do and manage. And I feel they need advocates. They need maybe a Scrum Master or an Agile Delivery Manager, someone to fight for them and to help them prioritize, because they're going to get stuff coming from everywhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you on a platform team now?
I'm platform adjacent. I'm a developer, but I have huge sympathy for what I see with platform teams. I try and bridge that gap wherever I can. I learn what they do. I try and be a really engaged person with my teams.
Yeah.
But I see the pain. And I just wondered if you got any insight to help.
Yeah, it's a great question. One thing I didn't really point out in the slides that this is a great reminder to add in is that treating your platform as a product means creating a balanced platform team. So when you talk about the business as usual versus those sort of forward-looking features that require time and thought and strategy, it is hard to balance. And a lot of platform teams end up feeling like they're just at the end of a fire hose, and all they're doing is just responding. They're in survival mode. Platform teams that treat the platform as a product hire product owners for those platform teams. And those product owners have a different set of skills, I think, than the typical traditional platform engineer or engineer full stop, because their perspective is on exactly the question or the problem that you're pointing out, which is how do we balance business as usual, keeping the lights on, with actually adding above and beyond value from our platform? Because if all you're doing is going through the queue and doing the one manual exercise after the next, you're not really able to think strategically about the work and the type of value you can add. So I'd say whether it's Kanban or Scrum or anything like that, I think a product mindset, having somebody in a product owner role or tech lead oftentimes will also straddle the sort of business technical side of things, but having somebody in a role that's thinking strategically and aligned with the business and is able to not only see where the value add is the highest, but they can also have access to stakeholders and leadership to have those conversations. I think without that, you do tend to get sort of a group of engineers who are more in support roles, and they can't think strategically, and they can't really execute the way that they could if they could step back and prioritize. So I'd say more than any type of methodology, similar to an application that you're building, having a product owner there is going to help you have those conversations about, is this week the week to tools down and actually go at the bugs? Or is this the week to say that bug that's there is actually not so critical, let's instead focus on getting this feature out the door? And I think without that, it can be a big challenge.
Thank you.
Excellent. Andy, you've got a question. Go for it.
Hi, yeah. So I was just wondering about the name platform team. I've heard the name enablement team. So is that the same thing, or is that something different?
It's a great question. It really is so contextual to the organization. I think you have to look at that team and peel back the responsibilities that they're performing day to day. If that team is enabling application teams so that those teams can deliver value faster to customers, then yes, I would say it's a platform team if they're working on standardizing the sets of tools that those application teams are using. there are, yeah, many labels for these kinds of teams, but I think depending on the team and the type of work they're focused on, you'll get such a spectrum of low value versus really high value from that team.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any other questions?
These are great questions.
Yeah, we've had some really great discussion. It's amazing. I'm just going to wait in case anybody wants to put one in the chat. If you're not able to unmute, obviously do feel free to message me and I can ask it for you. I might not understand entirely your question, but I'm sure Winner will, so that would be great. If anybody who can't unmute has a question, I'll just give it a few moments. Okay, I will take that as a no. So all that's left for me to say then today is thank you so much, Winner, for coming and sharing some of what you know, and for that great discussion at the end as well. Thank you everybody for joining us today, and anyone who's joining us online. I hope you or watching the recording rather, I hope you've enjoyed the session, and if you have any further questions, I'm sure there are ways to get in touch with you, Winner, if people want to discuss further.
Yes, so I didn't write anything on any of my slides, which is very helpful for me, but I am always happy to talk about this stuff. I have experience building platforms and talking to loads and loads of platform teams, so I love talking about it. So if you do have any questions about it, or you're curious, or you even just want to throw some ideas out there and see how they land, then I am on Twitter, I am on LinkedIn, and I will also maybe pass along the best email. But yeah, you can find me online and connect. Happy to chat.
Careful,
go for it, Chris.
I'll spam you with questions.
Go for it. I love questions.
I love that. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So yeah, like I say, thank you so much, Winner, for coming and sharing with us, and thank you everyone who's joined us either right now or watching the recording. It's great to see you all, and I look forward to seeing you at our next LJC event. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, Abby. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.